Hey everybody, this is Eden Maybon of LightCycleAstrology.com. Hope you're doing well out there today. Well, it's that time again where we take a look at the astrology for the month ahead. This time it's the astrology of September we're doing an overview for. It's a very, very fascinating and dynamic month. We have a lot of things that are wrapping up and coming to completion. So for me, I think the major theme of September really is things moving into a phase of completion or culmination or final judgment, or moving into a space where they will be weighed against other things and sort of understood from a fresh perspective. Projects that, if they aren't completing or being wrapped up, are being brought forward from the standpoint of a fresh perspective based on perhaps different belief structures or different agendas behind them. So this is a really interesting month. We'll take a look at the major transits ahead. Before we do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. Leave some comments in the comment section, and you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com if you want to get a personalized reading from me and feel like you need some more personal astrological guidance, whether that's taking a look at major changes ahead for you and how they might turn out, transit forecasts just to get prepared for maybe a year ahead, zodiacal periods that are happening for you, or whatever the case is. Seeing an astrologer and developing a relationship is almost like getting a spiritual massage in a way. So wait times are only about 2 weeks out right now, and the prices are pretty affordable. And I do my best to provide as much value as I can in terms of delineating techniques from a multiple kinds of ways. So check that out if you're interested. Okay, well, let's get into the astrology for September 2023, and we'll pull up the real-time clock now and take a look at what is coming through right at this time at the top of the month. Now, I actually have the real-time clock set to August the 29th, and that is because something that happens right before the month begins is, you'll notice down here at the bottom of the chart, we have Uranus stationing to turn retrograde. So, this summer there have just been a lot of themes of retrograde planets. So we've had a major Venus retrograde. We've had Mercury retrograde. We, of course, have seen Saturn be in retrograde for a while now, Neptune retrograde. Jupiter is about to station to turn retrograde as well. So we have just had this experience of a lot of retrograde action. One thing that I think is a very, very interesting distinction between outer planets when they turn retrograde as compared to the traditional visible 7 planets of antiquity when they're retrograde is that, of course, the outer planets are not visible, or they're not considered to be visible. Technically, you can see Uranus if you have the perfect conditions and you're very skilled at finding things in the sky and you have really, really good eyesight. And, it's a very, very faint, dim object that can be seen with the naked eye, but for the sake of astrological theory, we group Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto into the planets that are connected to the invisible realm that is synonymous, we think, with something coming from the depths of that which is beyond the normal waking consciousness, right? So Uranus as a planet going retrograde, one signature that I think retrograde outer planets can give to us is that what is normally kind of beyond the conscious waking sense, things that come from deeper in the unconscious that we don't always know are coming, things that surprise us, as often is the case with Uranus. It's almost like they become more entrenched and they're deeper down, or maybe the things that are deeper inside of us have a gateway where they're allowed to come out for a time. And I think that is potentially what we could be seeing with Uranus as aspects are being made to this planet, getting ready to change course, and perhaps signaling that things that are deeper within us are able to somehow make their way through the depths on up to consciousness. So we could see very interesting manifestations of Uranus retrograde, a planet that often connects to things becoming unstuck or having breakthroughs or revolutions, or things that are surprising, like sudden bolts of lightning out of nowhere. Speaking of lightning, A friend showed this to me the other day. Actually, I think it was August the 29th that I was watching these videos with him, where people had gotten strucken by lightning within a matter of minutes. Like the same guy gets hit once and then like a minute later gets hit again. Absolutely crazy. But this is, I think, a little bit what it's like, especially because we have planets in Virgo right now, and Virgo is a double-bodied sign. But be that as it may, my point is simply that what are outer planets like when they're retrograde? I think that the distinction of retrograde outer planets is something that is allowing things from a place that is normally very, very inaccessible to come to the surface. Now, of course, this can be bad and it can be good. In terms of being bad, it's like, whoa, where did that reaction come from? This is really, really completely and utterly, shocking beyond anything I could imagine. But the same is true on the positive side, where it's almost like, wow, I never knew that I had that ability within me, or I never knew that I was that creative, or I never knew that I needed that kind of freedom or liberation. Though that's a really positive side of potential things coming from Uranus retrograde, I think. But in any case, that is what is happening even before the months begin, just a couple of days here on August the 29th. And then by the time we get to August the 3rd, things are really getting interesting. So if we roll the real-time clock forward to 4 days later, we have now Venus stationing to turn direct in the sign of Leo. And we also have on the same day, look down here right by Uranus that is stationing retrograde and retrograde by this point, we have Jupiter stationing retrograde as well. So such an interesting phenomena, I think, because this Venus retrograde has been, I think most people would agree, a very potent Venus retrograde. I know for me personally, I went through some incredible things that were linked to the symbolism of Venus going retrograde in my 10th house. Things like surgery. I've never had surgery before. I had an appendicitis. This caused me to not be able to work for a number of weeks. And there were major relational things that were worked out, some tensions and things in relationships that had gone through a process of being worked out and resolved that were difficult. So if you watch the astrology podcast, you saw Chris and Austin talking about how this was for celebrities, like the summer of breakups for celebrities and things like this. So I think this Venus retrograde, a lot of people would agree, was a pretty potent one with the Barbie release and all of that. So in any case, now we are wrapping up the process that has been going on with the Venus retrograde, where things are becoming into more of a gelled kind of situation. Things are either being reconciled within relationships, or there is somehow a return to things being a little bit more smooth in creative processes going forward. You have to take a look at what house is Venus had Venus been going retrograde in your birth chart to sort of get a sense of what particular areas or topics of life it may had to do with. But in any case, whatever that is, it's coming to more of a gelling or a reconstruction or a recovery, or something that is able to move forward in a smoother, harmonious way, especially as it pertains to relationships. So that is, of course, a positive thing. But one thing that is really, really interesting is that going forward, we're going to have a square again between Venus and Jupiter. And now Jupiter is stationing to turn retrograde. So that is giving a nuance to the story that has been connected to the other two previous Venus-Jupiter squares. So a lot of dynamic change right at the beginning of the month here. If we go forward to September the 4th, just the next day, Mercury Combust retrograde. So let me just break that down in case this is something that is new for you. Mercury Combust, meaning Mercury is within 7 or 8 degrees of the sun, heading back towards the sun, heading back towards that conjunction with the sun that we call Cazimi. So this is a pre-Cazimi Mercury under combustion. Now, Technically, Mercury in his own domicile will be sheltered from the harshness of combustion. If you think about combustion, generally it means it's like caught on fire, right? Think about the Lahaina fires, the Lahaina wildfires in August that happened in Hawaii, where Venus was in that combustion with the sun in a sign where she was not in one of her own temples and did not have protection, did not have the shade or the dwelling over her to protect her from the harshness of the heat of the sun. And what happened? Boom, something beautiful caught on fire and destroyed a lot of relationships. So the symbolism of now Mercury being in that same position that Venus was in earlier in August. But the difference here is that Mercury has the roof over him to protect him from the harshness of the rays. So this isn't so bad as the Venus combustion, but nonetheless, Mercury combust retrograde, making a trine to Jupiter, who is stationing to turn retrograde. So I want to pull up some of my notes for this. I've written out some key words for this. Whereas the first visit of this aspect, Mercury was in direct motion during the heat of Venus's retrograde. We saw federal rescuers arrive in Lahaina. That is something that really is fascinating, because this is one of the aspects this month that is going to be visited for the third time. And it really is the completion of whatever the last two times have maybe been connected to. So, for instance, the first one was on August the 10th. The second one is coming at the beginning of this month, September the 4th. And then we have another one this month on September the 25th. So we have this series of transits that has happened because of a retrograde, where it hit first one time, retrograded back into it, and then stations and turns direct and will pass through it one final time. And so, of course, those things can be all connected. But to give you an example of this, when the first one of these aspects was perfecting Mercury in direct motion, making that trine back to Jupiter, the Lahaina wildfires had broken out. And by the time that this aspect perfected was right around the time where the media reported that federal rescue workers had arrived on scene and were beginning to give aid to people in need, which carries that Mercury trine Jupiter essence, right? It's something fortunate or good, some source of help or mediation that comes along and provides some kind of helping hand that is of benefit, beneficial help. But that was when Mercury was going forward in direct motion. Jupiter was going forward in direct motion. Now, interestingly enough, we have Mercury going retrograde and we have Jupiter stationing to turn retrograde. So what is the difference that may have been connected to the beginning of August that is a part or a continuation of the story that began at that time? But there is now a signature of reworking something, right? Or pausing and coming to a moment where potentially belief structures are beginning to be called into question. Perspectives that were based on certain beliefs, are they changing, or are they in the stage where they're beginning to fall apart somehow, and we're being shown that it's maybe not the whole truth, or maybe it's not the truth that is relevant to us any longer. But there's a shift potentially in confidence, belief, faith, growth, momentum. Or it could be just an exchange, a compromise, or a trade-off for one idea or desire for another in a process about to be resolved. Now, this process has one more time to come to some kind of completion at the end of the month, where we get one final pass of this aspect between Mercury and Jupiter. Jupiter will still be in retrograde, but Mercury will have finished up his retrograde and be back into direct motion. So we're carrying the seeds. We're kind of in the midway point of this story, whatever it is. This Mercury trine Jupiter story that began in August. We're kind of in the midway point of the plot, and there's nuance to it. And there may be shifts or change around belief, confidence, something that is driving the ideology forward or momentum forward. And it could even be potentially who is helping us, why they're helping us, things that are of benefit, either tapering off or shifting or changing, or something around that kind of signature of Jupiter stationing to begin to reverse. So that's a process that is adding nuance to the trine. So some of my keywords again are a curious tapering off of confidence, belief, faith, growth, momentum, or an exchange, compromise, or trade-off of one idea or desire for another. We're going to see the wrapping up of this process by the end of the month. So it's just a moment where you want to take a look and try to understand what is this aspect in relation to in your life, because it's kind of in the midway point. So that is happening in the midst of Venus stationing to turn direct and Jupiter stationing to turn retrograde. So it's almost like you get polarized movements. You get something recovering and going one way, and then you get something that is maybe beginning to fall apart or be called into question, moving into a place of not as much confidence. It's a very interesting dynamic, I think. Okay, so let's roll the real-time clock forward, and we'll go to September the 6th here. And this is when we are getting to the midway point of the Mercury retrograde on September the 6th. And you'll see that this is the moment where Mercury and the Sun are conjunct. And because this conjunction is happening still within that trine to Jupiter, the Mercury-Jupiter aspect is very much a part of the rendering or the synthesis that happens when we usually see a Mercury cazimi moment. So let me describe this to you. Mercury cazimis are generally about something coming to a rendered clarity. It's a process that we have been working on, begins to take some kind of image that is understandable to us. There is something that says, oh, okay, I have this information now, I understand, or I'm beginning to sense that there is some new knowledge or perspective that is really helping me see this. Now, because this is still contacting Jupiter, a planet that has to do with big perspectives, right? That 30,000 foot overview where it's not really looking at the details, it's sort of seeing the bigger picture. But making this aspect to Mercury a planet that is all about seeing those little details and honing in and really being meticulous, especially in the sign of Virgo. You have a very powerful cazimi that is speaking to not only being able to see some kind of larger perspective potentially, but also being able to zoom in very, very meticulously and see the details, being able to organize the plan, put the mental prowess to really, really good use. This is when all cylinders in the mind are sort of firing, and it may be because there is that shift with Jupiter providing a different perspective, beliefs that are going through a process of beginning to change or shift in a way that maybe orients the project towards a new direction, or the things that you're working on or understanding right now in a new way. So this is a really, really just fascinating cazimi, one that's unusual because it's very near the exaltation degree of Virgo, Mercury in his own temple, not having been beat up too bad by combustion, having that resource of protection being in his own temple and exaltation place, and then receiving that shifting or changing belief that Jupiter is right now going through as he is stationing to turn retrograde at this moment. So that is coming through on the 6th. And let me just give a little bit of some of my keywords for this. So rendering of concepts, beliefs, or goals, synthesis, clarifying, heightened education or deduction, mental effectiveness to study, analyze, plan, communicate. These are all things that are really, really good for Mercury. This cazimi is a setup that ties in with the trine with Jupiter that will perfect again after the retrograde completes. Moments of a broad 30,000-foot view for all the details. This could also be adventurous changes of perspective. So it's not just that things are shifting or changing in the way we understand something or believe in something, but it's like there's an adventurous spirit that says, wow, we're really going out on a limb here, but it feels good. New seeds in the mind that are both rational and based on belief. This seed will grow over the next Mercury synodic cycle too and play itself out. So watch what kind of ideas are presenting themselves to you right now. I think that is really important. So that is coming on September the 6th. If we go to September the 12th now, well, this is actually between September the 12th and October the 8th. For me, this is the single most interesting thing that is happening astrologically in the month of September is this almost aspect. It's not, you wouldn't call it an aspect that perfects because it doesn't. We have Venus applying into a sextile with Mars. I'm going to demonstrate this because this is just so interesting and highly unusual. On September the 12th, you'll see Venus at 13 degrees and 35 arc minutes. And here is Mars in Venus's temple of Libra at 10 degrees and 27 arc minutes. So there is the application of a sextile, right? Venus is applying to Mars by 60 degrees within 3 degrees. And that is when we see the beginning of a sextile form. But Venus drops out of retrograde just ahead of Mars. See how Venus is at 13 degrees and here's Mars at 10. Venus is a faster planet than Mars. But when planets, when they reverse course, when they reverse direction, or when they begin to move direct again, there is a period of a speed up or slowdown. In this case, Venus has been going backwards and then she makes a stop, puts on the brakes, and then is slowly changing direction back into direct motion. And this takes a while for Venus to get up to her normal speed. She does so just ahead of the angle to Mars. And because of doing this just ahead of the angle to Mars, where she's at 13 and not before 10 like Mars is, as Venus picks up speed, Venus and Mars track together at the same time for many days, weeks actually. So you'll see as I roll the real-time clock forward, throughout the end of the month, Venus and Mars are always within about 2 degrees. I think the closest they get is just over a degree, but generally speaking, they are staying within 2 degrees of each other. And this is because Venus is slowly picking up speed and moves faster than Mars. So Mars is kind of just going at his normal clip. But Venus dropped in ahead of the angle and is slower than normal, so they stay within aspect. And essentially how this plays out is, of course, normally what would happen is that Venus would make a completed aspect to Mars and the angle would be perfected at exactly 60 degrees apart. But Venus has dropped in ahead of the angle. And the only reason that they're tracking together within 3 degrees of a sextile is because Venus is not going her regular speed. Now, what happens is by October the 8th or the 9th, we have Venus entering the sign of Virgo. And this essentially breaks up the sextile between the two planets because now both planets are in neighboring signs. And you can't have a sextile when planets are in neighboring signs because even though technically degree-based, they're still about 60 degrees apart. Those two signs, from a whole sign perspective, do not see each other. They're neighbors. So it's like they're in each other's blind spot from the standpoint of ancient astrology. So from that ancient astrology technique, we don't consider planets in neighboring signs, even if they're in a degree-based aspect like a sextile. We don't consider them to be within the aspect any longer. Be that as it may, they're still relatively close to a sextile, and it's just really interesting. And then what happens after that? Venus is finally, by this point, beginning to move at her normal speed. And then, of course, she just begins to pull away from that sextile, even within the degree-based connection. And it's not long after that she is, she's way outside of the sextile by degree. So I'm belaboring this because, first of all, this is really, really unusual. You don't normally see this at all. I have been practicing astrology for, years and years now. I don't remember this. I don't remember this happening before. Maybe it had and I just forgot, but I can't remember ever seeing two planets do something like this. And it's just because of the very specific place that Venus dropped out of retrograde, slightly ahead of the angle to Mars, that this is taking place. But in any case, what this represents for me is that we have a Venus-Mars sextile aspect that never really perfects. So I think that is where you derive the symbolism. You have all of the energy of Venus sextile Mars kind of playing out. And it's an aspect that is, I think, a lot of fun. There is a lot of harmonious tension between the sexes. There is sexuality with Venus and Mars in a sextile that is romantic and beautiful and exciting or dangerous and lovely. It's just about one of the best aspects that you could have between the lover planets. So we've just come off a Venus retrograde where there potentially has been, relationship issues. And now there is great harmony and attraction developing between the two planets of sexuality. So that is the signature. And I think that can play out within, things that are fun. There is a lot of fun to be had with this aspect, but without a perfection, this may be symbolic of something never completing or synchronizing up perfectly. Still, it might not matter because this brings fun, and that's all that matters at the end of the day somehow. So, for instance, Venus is providing support to Mars when Mars is feeling like a fish out of water. And that's because, of course, Mars in Libra is in a place that is kind of foreign to him, being in a sign that is opposite to one of his natural temples. So Mars in Libra can feel a little bit disassociated from the environment around him. So, for instance, Mars says, well, I want to do Marsy stuff, right? Maybe he might say, I want to fight for fairness and justice, right? Mars and Libra. I'm ready to start a fight, but it's for a cause. It's going to be for justice or fairness or something like that. And Venus providing resources through that sextile, both by whole sign and by degree, is going to try to provide resources to him. She sees Mars. She understands what he is going through. There is communication between the two planets that she's going to try to become a good provider of resources to Mars. So Mars wants to fight for fairness and justice, for example. Venus says, I'm going to make you look good while you do it so that people align with your cause, right? That's kind of how this could play out in one example. Or another example might be that Mars says, I want to stir the pot and break up the boring harmony, right? I'm going to be the bowl in the china shop in the sign of Libra. And Venus says, well, how about an affair with your boss? That's a kind of a scandalous one. Mars might say something like, I want to get married fast. Just all of a sudden, let's just do it. Let's just get married. Even though our parents disagree and will be totally shocked by this and not be on board. And Venus might say, I'll make your partner more charismatic than they normally are. You're going to be so attracted to your partner that even though, this could ruffle or stir the pot in ways that are going to really shake things up, it's like you can't resist. Your partner is somehow more beautiful or attractive than they usually are. And it's like, there's the Mars and Libra signature where there's kind of that bowl in the china shop, or Mars sort of somehow breaking up the normal harmony or normal convention or social etiquette or whatever it is. So I think that's pretty interesting. All of these may be fun, but will they actually happen at the end of the day? That's the nuance where this aspect never truly perfects. Or will it just be fun and entertaining to romanticize about circumstances for a while? I think that is likely what this may signify. But you tell me in the comments or share any stories about how this works out, because this is such a unique thing that it's hard for me to even speculate on one level. So that is background energy for the month that is beginning on the 12th and really spanning the rest of the month and a little bit into October before Venus enters Virgo. Now, if we roll the real-time clock forward to September the 14th, we are coming to the new moon in Virgo that is in a trine as it forms to the planet Uranus. And simultaneously, we also have Mercury stationing to turn direct. So, wow, what a dynamic new moon. I mean, first of all, we're talking about a new moon in Virgo, Virgo being a double-bodied sign that is ruled by Mercury, a planet that is incredibly flexible. Mercury goes every which direction, has total flexibility to think this and that at the exact same time, ruling a sign, of course, having a lot of those same characteristics of being very flexible, being very fluid, being really capable of thinking one thing and then changing their mind or something like that. Having that fluid mental dexterity is what Mercury does best. Mercury stationing to turn direct, and the new moon coming through. This is a sign that there is obviously a new beginning. There is something that is beginning to signal a new cycle ahead that is going to be bringing in the culminative fruits of the Mercury retrograde. Whatever Mercury retrograde process has been happening for you in whichever house, those things are basically being seeded into the new cycle ahead and will begin to play out. And they do have a very strong Uranian signature to them because we have the sun and the moon at about 21 degrees. Actually, let me just get the hours a little bit better on the real-time clock so this isn't confusing to watch. But okay, there we go. The sun and the moon exactly conjunct, and you'll see Uranus at 22 degrees in Taurus and the sun and the moon at 22 degrees of Virgo. So that's a really close aspect for a new moon. So definitely we're seeing two things. We're seeing here's Mercury stationing to turn direct right at that moment, hosting the new moon, exalted in the sign of Virgo, having wrapped up the retrograde process Mercury has been going through. Being reborn as a morning star and having this aspect back to Uranus that is saying, okay, what is this new cycle ahead all about? Well, clearly it has these reversals of Uranian potential to it, right? That quality of those gateways that are deeply embedded in you that may be surprising that are coming out. Now, I think because it's a trine, it could be speaking to some pretty productive and useful energy, right? We have planets in Virgo and we have Uranus in Taurus. So there is this potential quality for the riches of the depth, right? The riches of the earth, the constructiveness of what it is that you're building, the ability to really take your mental powers and do something tangibly with them in this earth element, and how the new cycle ahead really is speaking to the potentiality of surprises or chaos for benefit, right? This isn't just like the disaster that comes out of nowhere that's like, oh my gosh, this has ruined everything. This is the disaster that comes out of nowhere that it's like somehow it's like, oh, this is kind of nice that I'm not chained to this situation anymore. You know, it's like if your house burned down, like if you were in Lahaina in the wildfire and your house burned down, for most people, that's obviously very tragic, especially if you've had loved ones that are missing or have died. So my condolences. But, you know, in the unusual circumstance that you were okay and you survived and nobody was hurt or injured or lost, and maybe your house was underwater, maybe you were looking to get out of that situation. This is like a fortunate kind of reversal, I believe, of a fortune that is seeding the new lunation cycle ahead, that is really lending itself to incredibly mental dynamic dexterity, the ability to really, really, really put forth new ideas, new communication, be liberated from old structures or forms. And so that is part of this new cycle ahead here. Key ideas, a time to implement plans. Given that Virgo can at times be connected with themes also of purity and innocence lost, coming of age, etc. Yeah, Virgo has this quality where it can be concerned about what is pure and what is not pure. And that's because Virgo is a sign that is dedicated to preparing for the dark half of the year that begins at the time of Libra. So things need to be judged. Things need to be harvested. The wheat needs to be separated from the chaff. We have to see what is useful and tangible and helpful that will provide through the more difficult months of the year ahead when we're in the cold darkness of winter. And Virgos are very good at that. But that purity, that loss of innocence where the summer is over, that's the time to enjoy the sun and heat, to swim at the river, to have bonfires, to go camping. That is largely coming to an end because Virgo is heading towards Libra, and Libra is the exaltation place of Saturn, a place that is exalting responsibility and duty and seriousness. So Virgo is serious about becoming serious. Excuse me. And so themes that Virgo often encounters are what is pure and what is not pure. Virgo was the virgin, right? The virgin. The virgin is something that is pure. Innocence lost. Mercury as a planet that represents the youth or youth in children or children. Innocence lost. Children coming of age or going through the rites of passage. These are themes that Virgo often encounters. And so a new lunation cycle in the sign of Virgo might be playing into the themes of rediscovering attitudes that are more unconventional, that connection back to Uranus. And I think that this almost describes a little bit of like a kind of like a teenage era, you know, where when we go through our teenage years, we can be pretty unconventional. We can be really explorative. We can be really flexible and fluid in our mental dexterity. We're really quick-witted. It has that teenage years kind of vibe. Sometimes people take that too far and they go really, really radical. I know I did. Sometimes you can be grounded, but you can still be a little bit quirky or odd. So do I stay grounded or be quirky and odd? Do I walk away from conventions? Am I finding liberation or my identity, following my own music? These are really, really deep-seated themes, I think, of the new moon and the lunation cycle ahead that is beginning on September the 14th in the middle of this month. So that is what you have for the middle of the month. And then if we roll the real-time clock forward to the 17th here, oops, got to get out of hours, back in the days. Okay, by the 17th, we have Venus square Jupiter. So this is another aspect. Venus square Jupiter. The first time we had this was on June the 11th. The second pass, while Venus was in retrograde, we revisited the Venus square Jupiter on August the 22nd. This is the third and final perfection of this aspect. Now Venus, of course, is in direct motion and is completing the process that has been happening in the summer, right? That began at the beginning of June. So whatever is happening, there is some kind of continuity to it that probably tied in with the Venus retrograde in a big way. This Venus square Jupiter. So I know for me, the Venus square Jupiter was very, very indulgent. It was, personally, I normally am careful about sugar. I'm careful about foods that convert into sugar. I can be almost like religiously fanatical at times on my diet, even though you wouldn't think so, because my wonderful genetics do not predispose me to having natural thinness. I can be really, really on the ball, on the game, really stringent about what is going into my body. These are also themes of Virgo. I have a Saturn. I'm a native of Saturn in Virgo in the 11th house. So I can be really, really stringent about health and what goes into my body and be really strict. This Venus square Jupiter aspect that has been coming through over the summertime has propelled me into almost wanting to check into rehab for my ice cream addiction. I mean, I might go a year or more without even having ice cream in the refrigerator, let alone thinking to myself that ice cream should just be a staple that happens all the time. And it wasn't just ice cream from Safeway, it was ice cream from Baskin and Robbins, and it was specific flavors that were refined. It was there was like a refined sense of exactly what I wanted. There was an over the topness that came with this Venus square Jupiter. So Venus square Jupiter, this one last time, I see this shaking out two ways. Aims, goals, perspectives that are operating under a revised belief paradigm worked out during Venus retrograde are sort of beginning to integrate right now. And what I mean by that is Venus in Leo, during the Venus retrograde, has really been about things that are really central and important to you, something that is at the heart of what you're aiming for, big goals that are maybe perhaps lifelong goals, or things that are just really, really important to your own autonomy or authority. Those have been a lot of the themes of Venus in Leo, and those themes have been kind of going through a revision during the retrograde. Now, those themes were fueled by a Jupiter that was saying, yes, more, give it to me, big, chase it, do it, go big or go home. Now, Jupiter stationing to turn retrograde may be beginning to revise some of the beliefs, some of the perspectives, or the confidence in the reasons why we have those goals, or the reasons why we've been aiming or doing something in a particular way. So I think that could be one way that this shakes out. We could be pursuing the same goals, but under different management. That might be a theme of this as well, in the form of a shifting belief perspective. Of course, Jupiter retrograde, right? Things that are shifting around those beliefs. And the beginnings of tapering off of things that may have been too expensive, too grandiose, too extravagant, indulgent, or you could see the opposite sometimes of that, where you could just plain have a revisiting of such things like, I'm going to keep buying ice cream this one last time, So I see it going either one of two ways. Either you're going to be a little bit more on the Jupiter retrograde side of things, where you're trying to move away from the previous indulgences or expensive taste or whatever it is that was sort of over the top, trying to get yourself a little bit back onto some moral high ground, or you're just saying, one last time, please, like, give me the extra cherries and syrup on top. So I think that is a tension and fascinating dynamic of the middle of the month here. Okay, now if we go forward to September the 19th, we are going to get a Sun opposition to Neptune that has a simultaneous application to Pluto by trine as well. So remember, I was saying at the beginning of the video where we were talking about Uranus stationing to turn retrograde, and how the outer planets are really representing those deeper, potentially below the normal waking consciousness, things that are really connecting to the instincts that we're not aware of, or just things that we've forgotten that are really buried or deep in us somehow. We have Uranus providing action in retrograde, and now we have Neptune and Pluto as well. The rest of the outer planet gang are coming together, and the Sun opposes them. So what could this mean? This is such a fascinating lineup. I know I've used that word a lot to describe this month, but think about this for a second. The Sun in Virgo, about to cross one of the most significant thresholds in the zodiac, moving across the autumnal equinox point, where the Sun enters the sign of his fall. So let's just explore this a little bit. Why did ancient astrologers say that the Sun was in fall in the sign of Libra? Well, obviously, when the Sun moves across the threshold of equal day and equal night, that from that point forward is the darkness increasing and the light waning for the year, right? We're 6 months into a period where darkness will be more than light will be. There will be more minutes within a rotation of the Earth of nighttime or darkness than there will be of daylight. So, of course, the sun has fallen. In the language of antiquity, to say someone had fallen or fell here or fell there didn't just mean they actually fell down, but it meant they died, or they died. So the sun dies when he gets across this threshold. So it's really fascinating that the sun makes an opposition to Neptune and a trine to Pluto. Pluto being a god of the underworld and a god of death himself, right? Neptune, not so much a god of the underworld, but Neptune as a god of the eternal. And I sort of think of Neptune sometimes as, what's that young man's name? Tyler. Oh, I'm forgetting his last name. I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about, but he is that really famous psychic medium that connects people with people that have passed on. Neptune and Pluto can really have that dimension to it. So the sun really is angling against Neptunian things, saying, am I practical? Am I staying grounded? Or am I needing to go out into a realm that has more of a mystical side to it? Do I need to explore something other than the normal, arena of life, the mundane things in life? Somehow there's a tension at this moment where it's like, am I going to read something fantastical and just escape for a while, or do I need to keep my head in the game and make sure I'm on top of the details? And I think that the sun entering Libra shortly after this represents that tension of the sun's death. So symbolically, for us personally, this can represent a time where pursuits or life direction or the ways in which we are aiming towards what we're trying to do, how we're steering our lifeboat, all of these things that are connected to sort of the plot line of the life. There's something going through a major transition. There's something heading into the underworld and out of the above world. And I think that is largely representative of just the natural instinct of this time of the year to say the summer is over, the spring is over. This push that we have during spring and summer to get things going, to sow the seeds, to have a new year of productivity. Those efforts are somehow making a transition towards the underworld, which means that we could be coming into a place of culmination or of harvest, of reaping what we have sowed, of judgment, people judging us, people judging other people. And this is a moment where there is kind of this mystical transition into almost like a psychedelic realm of catharsis and the underworld and the depths of things that are coming up from these deep places we didn't even know were inside of us, that can be mystical and otherworldly. So just a really, really beautiful but otherworldly, dark, secret dimension that is somehow intruding upon the rationality of a dying sun in a very rational sign ruled by Mercury after Mercury has come back into direct motion. So there's a tension there between fantasy and reality on some level. But I think that it's meant to get us across that threshold where we will make big pivots or adjustments or turns based on our judgment of how things have been going over the last 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is. So a really beautiful time of the year, I think. Okay, now if we roll the real-time clock forward to September the 23rd, this is when we get the actual autumnal equinox here. The sun enters the sign of Libra on this day. And so now we have an interesting connection between Venus and the sun, because now Venus is in the sun's temple of Leo, and we have the sun now in Venus's temple of Libra. And of course, Venus is really busy still providing resources back to her two guests in the sign of Taurus, her other temple. So Venus is, she's really going forward now. She's got a lot of authority. She has a lot of power, and she's in that dominant sextile position to the sun in Libra. So I think that this is a really fortuitous transition into the dark half of the year, because there is this mutual reception between the two planets. But we do have Mars in Venus's temple as well, and he can be a rascal in there. So there are themes that are coming up right now that include that Mars kind of energy. And one thing that I have in my notes for this, okay, so keywords of the sun in Libra, just in general, things like harvest, weights and measurements, judgment, the underworld, completion of past efforts, duties or chains of love. Again, that's because Libra is the exaltation place of Saturn. So when you have Libra, which is the domicile of Venus, but is the exalted sign of Saturn, you get a combination of the mixture of Venus and Saturn kinds of things. So you could have the duty or responsibility and love, the being less self-serving and more thinking about the other kind of a thing. Aesthetic, refinement, and mutual exchange. These are all Libran kinds of qualities. But given that there is mutual reception between Venus and the sun now, and Mars is here in the sign as well, carrying on the mantle or torch of one who has passed could be a theme of this. Carrying on a legacy is destined to fail, or finding compromise amidst conflict, or as in constructive hashing out through quarreling, surrender, sacrifice, or legacy. So why do I say that? Again, it's because if you see the mutual reception between Venus and the sun in each other's signs, Venus is in a sign that has to do with the sun's legacy. So obviously Venus finishing up that Venus retrograde in the sun's temple is still trying to bring newly rendered solar things that it desires forward. It's still in the summertime. It's still thinking, hey, I'm on the throne. I'm going to do these important things, these important Venusian things. I'm going to have a really big moment of decoration or love or reconciliation or happiness or joy that is really important. That is still happening as if we're still in the summertime months. But the sun has now died, and he will likewise provide that dead solar theme back to Venus, because he is also responsible for Venus in his temple. So they exchange kind of ownerships. The sun says, well, I have died, I have reached the underworld, and I will provide you those things. I will provide you dead underworldly things, Venus. And Venus says, yeah, but I'm still important. I'm still doing things. I'm still on the stage. I want to bring things forward. So I think symbolically this might represent themes where there is like a lingering of trying to bring something forward, some central torch of inspiration or of power or of beauty forward, or of legacy, of desire forward. It's like we're carrying on the torch. It reminds me of like if like a patriarch in your family die, like your grandpa or something, and in his memory and out of love for him, you want to fulfill his wishes or carry out something that was really important to him. That for me, it kind of describes this scenario, at least as the sun enters this sign. It's like we may be the bearers of an effort that has already passed away, but it's important to keep carrying it on. And it doesn't really matter that it might not last or be eternal. It's like there's just a mission-driven sort of feeling here, especially with mission-driving Mars co-present in the sun's co-present with the sun in this place. So these are just speculations. Maybe these themes will be completely off. You let me know in the comments below if anything like this happens and resonates with you. But that's sort of the way I'm reading the mutual reception between Venus and the sun, which is a unique thing that is happening this time as we enter the fall season this year. So a big moment in the year and in the month of September, to be sure. Now, if we roll the clock forward to September the 5th, we only have a couple more to go in all of the lineup of planetary movements this month. Here we have Mercury trine Jupiter on September the 5th. Now, again, this is the third and final perfection of this aspect. We had right around the time that the Lahaina fires started on August the 10th. And then we had one at the beginning of September while Mercury was in retrograde. And now we are having one for a third and final time here. So again, we have ideas such as the big perspective. Now Mercury is going forward, a 30,000 foot view that perhaps is tempered by a wisdom that helps bring things forward towards the table of negotiation. Now that we have the sun in Libra, we have Mars in Libra, there could be conflict or fights over what is fair. There could be tensions around things being in arbitration, etc. You know, we could be trying to work things out that are difficult with other people. We're in negotiations. There is that real courtroom verdict kind of moment that is happening, especially as we're heading towards the full moon in Aries, which we'll get to here in a second. But Jupiter is lending that the lack of confidence that Jupiter is providing to Mercury now, because he is retrograde and sort of entering a space of maybe beginning to lose faith or move into a new moral position or begin to let go of an old moral position or perspective. There's a sense in which the 30,000 foot view is coming because there is some kind of new perspective or belief that is aiding the details, right? And this is going to be something helpful for the conflicts that might potentially be coming up through Mars being in the sign of Libra, heading towards the full moon in Aries and things like that. So that is kind of a transitionary moment we could see right before the full moon here, which happens on the 29th. As we get to the end of the month here, by September the 29th, we have a very, very powerful full moon coming through in the sign of Aries that is happening alongside a third and final perfection of Venus square Uranus. So to give you the history of this Venus square Uranus story that has been going all summer long, we had the first Venus square Uranus perfect on July the 2nd. We had the second one perfect when Venus was retrograde on August the 9th. And now we are having the completion of the series of perfections happen at the end of the month here, simultaneous to the full moon in Aries. So in my opinion, you almost could not get a more powerful full moon. This is one of the most powerful full moons for sure of the year. And we could sort of tease out some of the details. So on the one hand, the moon in the sign of Aries, the moon in Aries has a very youthful, vibrant, sort of refreshing quality to it. It's a moon that is almost like immature, but really brave. You know, it's bold and charismatic and takes decisive actions, makes decisive decisions, you know, sometimes too rationally, but other times by instinct that is really, really rooted in very high wisdom, close to the source, right? Aries is the beginning time of the spring, and you have that closeness to nature that is really vibrant. So I think Aries, people can often judge Aries as being maybe hot-headed or irrational, but I think that they have an incredible instinct. That sign has an incredible instinct that is just so connected. It's like the instincts of a newborn baby. You know, you know, there's almost no judgment in a way. It's innocent, it's raw, and it's vital, and it's closely connected to what needs to happen. So that is reflecting things like independence. But, you know, when you have planets in Libra, a sign that is concerned with how other people are, what perspectives they see, how we relate to other people and maintain relationships and are not just only self-interested. You get a tension there. Obviously, you get the tension of wanting to be independent or strike out on your own and needing to comply with the demands of relationships. You get the tension between self-sacrifice coming from Mars in Libra, right? Where we're talking about the sign, whereas the fall of the sun being a planet that represents things we do for ourselves. We're looking out for numero uno, right? Mars is very simpatico to that same kind of that same kind of perspective, where Mars says, I'm going to look out for me and do what I need to do. But Mars in Libra may be self-sacrificing, may go to war and sacrifice himself to save the ones that he loves. So we're balancing that potential of self-sacrifice with the culmination of energy very powerfully speaking to self-assertion with the full moon in Aries. We could also be seeing things like trials and verdicts. Now, I say trials because I ascribe the keyword trials to the sign of Aries, because it's not trials like you're in the courtroom. It's trials like in the ancient sense, where it's like they had the trials, or like the games in the Greek world, right, where they were doing feats of like athleticism or something like that, which is very connected to that athletic Marsy kind of thing. There could be the assertion or the in the new birth of things that we like, the conception of new energies and new actions that we are very, very passionate about right now, that are coming in, and those could be coming up against the karma of our previous actions, where there is some kind of verdict or judgment that is coming down. There are things that we're being judged out, and it's like there might be this tension where we're saying, well, I just need a fresh start. I just want to do something new. And people are saying, well, yeah, but the last time you did this and blah, blah, blah. And that can be the tension right there, I think, with this full moon. So we could be entering an arena of, kind of tense negotiations. We negotiate for fairness as we refresh our efforts. Potentially, we may seek unfettered hands to take stock and begin new tasks. Again, we have the Venus square Uranus that's perfecting for the third and final time in this series of Venus square Uranus perfections, and that is bringing in that it's like, you get the sense that the full moon in Mars's temple of Aries wants to be brave and strike out and be independent. The Venus square Uranus is saying, I don't want to be tied up in love or relationships. I don't want to be tied up in things that confine me for the purpose of my own desires. And then you have this tension in Libra that's saying, yeah, but what about your duties? What about your responsibilities? What about the marriage? Or what about the mortgage? Like all of those, what about the kids? All of those kinds of things. But it might be kind of difficult. There is so much tension in this full moon. As Mars is now on the journey to his place in Scorpio, a place where he is home, he is first encountered with a powerful aspect from Pluto October the 8th. That's another thing that was brought to my attention by Adam Ellenboss, where, again, we're heading towards a Mars square Pluto before Mars enters Scorpio, the place where Mars is home. So Mars is in a difficult place now in Libra, but is heading home. But before that can happen, there is some omen that says there will be an explosion. There will be something that blows up. There will be some tension that will absolutely have to be dealt with, and it is not going to be fun. Mars square Pluto, where Mars is in the superior square to Pluto, I don't think that that's very fun, especially in cardinal signs. That is speaking to you were doing this and something happened, and man, did you make an about face and pivot to a completely different thing. So we're ending the month with quite a bang here. The tension of Mars are really developing during the last week after the full moon on the way to the new moon. That last week or two, there are tensions with Mars that are really developing. Mars must work out and negotiate things that are difficult now. That is the way in which I see some of the transit energy playing out over the next month. I hope you guys have enjoyed this and have gotten something good out of this. Thanks for watching. We'll be back again for the next video. We'll start diving deeper into some of the specific transits for the next week ahead. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.